I'm Andy Bates, part of the team here at KFUO. While you hear me on the air and in podcasts, I'm also part of the team that works behind the scenes to bring you the programs like this that you value. What you hear on the air and in podcasts is just the tip of the iceberg. Listeners like you generously support everything that makes radio and podcasts happen. Administration, cutting-edge technology, software, hosts, producers, and more. You make this happen. Can we count on you to continue this support? KFUO Share-a-thon, now through April 5th, is a great time to show your support and make a gift or make a plan to give for a whole year. Your generosity is important and appreciated, not just by the KFUO team, but by listeners who get to hear and enjoy Christ-centered programs every day. Will you make a gift today? kfuo.org/give. kfuo.org/give.
Now imagine standing on the shore, and as you look out across the sea, something massive is moving beneath the waves. It breaches the water for just a second, and you can see scales like armor, eyes like dawn. It comes up and it breathes breath like fire, and you throw a spear, but it bounces off. You reach for a hook, and it snaps in two. In the previous chapter, it was Behemoth, but now in Job 41, the penultimate chapter of this book, God confronts Job with Leviathan, a beast so untamable, so fearsome that no man dares challenge it. And yet, in the face of this terrifying creature, God asks Job, and really us, if you cannot stand before Leviathan, how will you stand before me who created him? Good morning, dear saints. Blessed Lenten tide. Welcome to Thy Strong Word. Today is Monday, March 10th, and, well, you're listening to the program where every weekday morning we explore the Holy Scriptures through which God bespeaks us righteous and nourishes our faith. I'm your host, Pastor Phil Booe of St. John Lutheran Church in Laverne, Minnesota. Now, Thy Strong Word is made possible in part by the good folks over at the Lutheran Heritage Foundation. So let me just take a minute to tell you a little more about them. They do amazing work in their mission to equip churches and schools and families with free, Christ-centered resources and inspiring mission opportunities, but primarily to translate, then publish and distribute these books, these Lutheran books, these Christian books in languages that people can better understand, their own. So since 1992, they've done 179 languages, probably more even by now, over 1,600 publications, 6 million different prints. I'm telling you, go to lhfmissions.org. You'll be amazed at all the good work that they're doing and how you can get involved. lhfmissions.org. Help them help you share the faith in every language. Now, if you're also online and you're listening and you're thinking, boy, I don't know if I agree with Pastor Booe, or I don't know if I agree with Pastor Smith, or, that point Pastor Smith made was amazing. I just got to let him know. There's a way for you to both send your suggestions, corrections, and also compliments to our guest, Thy Strong Word at kfuo.org. If you send them to me, your questions and comments, I'll get them out on the air. And if you think we got something wrong, let us know. We'll either wrestle back with you or we'll concede. But either way, that's Thy Strong Word at kfuo.org. Well, let's get to it. I've already hinted at it. It's the Reverend Robert Smith, Pastor Emeritus up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He's going to be my guest this morning. Good morning, Pastor Smith. Welcome back to the show. Pastor Smith, how you doing, brother?
Doing pretty good. In the midst of editing a book, so that's going to take me until Easter. So that's going to keep me a little busy.
Now, is this you're editing your own book, someone else's book? What's the scenario here?
Oh, as usual, I'm what they used to call an amanuensis, which is a very fancy way of saying a cross between a secretary, an editor, and a ghostwriter.
Okay.
And I've been doing that since I started at the seminary with the professors there. And this is one of the professors' books. And he is one who is known for repeating himself over and over and over again. And that just doesn't work in a book.
Well, right. No, it doesn't. You could always go and read it over if you need to. Amanuensis. I have never heard of that before. I'm Googling it now. Okay. That's fascinating. I don't suppose you ghostwrite PhD dissertations asking for a friend.
No, but I was always the fellow who broke it to the PhD students that they had to read everything.
Yes.
No, I'm not kidding. You have to read everything about your topic.
Right. Well, so my people are saying, as you're collecting all these resources, he says, now, you're not going to be able to read everything. And you're like, hey, you need to read everything. I actually agree with you.
Right. Well, and the solution to that is a terribly long, ungainly, very, very specific title that narrowed it down. So what you have to read everything about is a smaller universe.
Yes.
But an amanuensis, amanuensis is the old form. We used to call them scribes. And we suspect that many of the New Testament writers were using amanuenses or were themselves amanuenses. So Mark would have been Peter's amanuensis. You see Paul writing at the end of some of his letters, see, this is written in big letters with my own hand, which is a tip that he wasn't physically writing the book,
right? But
he had an amanuensis. And Julius Caesar used to brag he could keep 50 amanuenses busy at the same time, that he would just say, write so-and-so about this. And then they would pretend to be Julius Caesar, and he would read it and sign off on it. So sometimes you try to speak like the writer, and sometimes you just straighten it out. I had one professor say, by now, Smith, your voice is my voice. And sometimes it's basically correcting sentences, supplying missing verbs, condensing text, or with editing student sermons. A lot of times it was said, you've been reading too much Greek recently, haven't you?
You could see it coming out in the sermon.
Right. And
my goodness.
But it's a ton of work. This current book, I need to take from around 200,000 words down to 100,000 words.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, that's the thing is that writing takes a lot of time. And so professional writers, it makes sense. I'm surprised it's not more of a thing, I guess it is in kind of way, just different titles. But, well, I'll tell you what,
right.
It makes me wonder who's writing this down for Job, right? So we've been covering Job and, who wrote Job? I don't know. That's something we've actually wrestled with because, is it Job writing these things down? Then what of the situations outside of his knowledge? What do you think about the authorship of Job since we're on this topic?
I really don't know because the scripture doesn't tell us. Sure. And normally, and with your next book, there's a great party game, Who Wrote the Book of Hebrews?
Right.
And everybody has their favorite. I agree with Luther that it was probably Apollos. But nobody really knows for sure. I don't think they even play that game in the commentaries on Job.
No, I think everybody just admits that we have no idea.
Yeah, it's such an ancient text. The best you can come is to guess when, and they're guessing the age of the patriarchs.
Well, I tell you what, the book of Job's not getting any younger, so we probably better get to it, right? So let's get to 41. Brother, would you start us off with a word of prayer, and then we'll jump into the text and see what we have right here in the next to last book of Job. Handing it over to you, brother.
Okay, sounds good. Almighty and everlasting God, you despise nothing you have made, and forgive the sins of all who are penitent. Create in us new and contrite hearts that, lamenting our sins and acknowledging our wretchedness, we may receive from you full pardon and forgiveness through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, so last time we were in Job was back on Thursday, and we encountered Behemoth in chapter 40. So Job, this faithful, this righteous man who's faced this unimaginable suffering. And I don't know if anybody's just joining in, but if you are, or you've never heard of Job, remember that Job, he loses his family, his wealth, he loses his health. And throughout the book, Job and his friends, they've debated on why God would allow such hardship. In fact, a lot of the things they say and the questions they ask and raise and the points they make, these could be conversations happening at coffee shops today all over the world as we struggle with God's fairness and justice. So starting in chapter 38, God finally speaks directly to Job, and not with explanations about his suffering, not answering all of Job's probing questions, but with just these powerful reminders of God's sovereignty. And so then in 40, God highlights this sovereignty through Behemoth, massive, mighty creature beyond human control, showing clearly that God's power surpasses human understanding. Today, we get into Leviathan. Pastor Smith, just starting with Behemoth for just half a second, I mean, what do you think about, well, really both these creatures, but Behemoth beginning with real creatures, symbolic creatures, dinosaurs? I had an Old Testament guy on for Friday, and yeah, he refused to jump into that pool, whether Behemoth is a dinosaur. I don't know. What do you think, brother?
Well, my guess is we're have kind of a collective fanciful creature that figures big in mythology. What I'm reading about Leviathan is he's a character that appears in a lot of Canaanite and Assyrian kinds of literature as pretty much what we got sitting in front of us here is a great sea monster. And so my guess is he ends up being a symbol for anything frightful that bumps in the night, kind of like Nessie.
Sure. Like there are, especially from Job's point of view, if you're talking the time of the patriarchs, even today, we don't have much of a catalog of what exists deep in the ocean, and we're always surprised. And I think of the stories of sea monsters and creatures throughout history, especially in seafaring context. I think of the giant squid that, was seen as the sea monster, probably the source of like Cthulhu and these other kind of deep
Kraken.
Kraken. And you all of this comes from a mixture of probably fear of the unknown, but also real actual creatures. So yeah, I think that makes sense. This idea that, is Leviathan this very specific animal? Well, we're going to hear there's some pretty fanciful things that he can do. So it does lead us to suggest that maybe this is more of a composite of all the scary, chaotic sea creatures, especially from Job's point of view, but even from ours. Well, let's look into it. Let's just read some of the text. I just want to read a little bit.
Sure.
Because he's pointing now to Leviathan. The transition is very abrupt. And really, even though he's talking about Leviathan, I hear in the first few verses here, the shift isn't about this amazing creature, but so much our works, our deeds. Can you do this stuff? Can you do something that, well, we'll just see. I'm going to start just a few verses back into 30, probably into 40. Let's start with 20. So speaking of Behemoth, he says, "For the mountains yield food for him where all the wild beasts play. Under the lotus plants he lies in the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh. For his shade, the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he's not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girls? let's just stop there. So verse 5, it ends with, can you make him a pet? Sounds like, but let's start back with 1. So so tell me, old Job, can you fish out this kind of creature? What do you? I mean, this is
are you going to put him back in your aquarium?
You got a like Leviathan in your pool there, just hanging out. And I think the implication is that God can do all those things. God can have mighty creatures as little pets.
Yeah, God could command them all along, all in any way that he wants, but we're not going to make him into Fido.
No, not us.
Or for that matter, to enslave them. I think there's a part of that. It kind of shifts to, can you treat him like a slave? Because he switches from something that you wouldn't say to an animal, but that you'd say to a person. Oh, sure. So I think there's a little bit of that too. Can you turn this great untamable force into your pet or your slave? And the short answer is, of course not.
This word though, this pet that we're talking about, Leviathan. I'm taking that Leviathan is one of those times where we take the Hebrew word and we say, well, it's so confusing. We're just going to take the Hebrew word and make it into an English word. So Leviathan, which would be the Hebrew, it becomes Leviathan. So what does it mean, though? I mean, it's a rare word for sure.
That it really is a good question. There's that's where the cocktail party fight breaks out. Is over who exactly it is. It seems that most people are thinking that it's some form of a crocodile, but the description sounds more like the way that Western literature has treated him as a great sea creature, like Nessie, or a giant whale. So you have Herman Melville turning him into the white whale, and you have all of these people talking about them as huge, powerful forces of chaos. And it appears that the early church fathers almost universally thought of it as a type of Satan.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're gonna see as Leviathan transitions from something that God can play around with and subdue to something he just crushes under his foot. So, I mean, that's why the pet analogy probably couldn't go too far, because who would do that to their pet? So, yeah, it definitely is something more almost like in the presence of God, something that's this mighty sea serpent dragon kind of thing. To God, it's like a little flea, a little bug, something he can just, take care of with nothing.
Hey, Leviathan, Fido, heal.
That's right. And he just does.
Yes.
So the crocodile is, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't match as much as, frankly, hippopotamus, in my opinion, matches with Behemoth. But yeah, I do wonder if it is just the result of us trying to shoehorn an animal we know about into it. Maybe it's an animal that no longer exists, or maybe it is symbolic.
But when I hear them talk about it as crocodile, I'm immediately thinking about the crocodile hunter and Australia Zoo with them wrestling.
Oh, sure.
The crocodiles, which they can manage. I don't think they could manage Leviathan, though.
No, probably not. Probably not. So we bring up this Leviathan who, if he's a crocodile, this is going to be one of these gigantic, enormous, dinosaur-like crocodiles, Paleolithic kind of creature. But the point, of course, here is that, here's a guy, verse 3, will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? I'm getting a hint of a little sarcasm here. The sense is this guy going to
he's not like a slave, you're not
is he going to beg for
around?
Right. Yeah, this guy, he looks to me to provide for him. And that's why I still think of a little bit of the pet analogy, because I mean, many pleas to you. Will he speak to you with soft words? Well, there is I have two cats, two cats, a bunny, a turtle, a snake, and two birds. Anyway, but I have two cats, and these cats are never as nice as when they want something, right? They look to us. They know that they want food from us. They want for us to open all the doors for them because they don't like anything closed. But they would also completely murder us in our sleep if they could. So the point is, you have this creature over which we can subdue. That's the relationship God has with the most fiercest thing you can think about. Are you going to go and put a leash on him for your little girls? And that's wild. That sentence is wild because Job's children are gone. And God says, are you going to put a leash for your children on this? Now, I know he's being metaphorical here and symbolic, but it really does bring home that, we're debating over what Leviathan can be, but let's not forget where Job is in this. He is being humbled by God. So it's kind of amusing for us to kind of take it apart. I don't think Job is finding any of this amusing. He's standing going, okay, God, I'm listening, right?
Well, this is like all of the hubris of humankind, that we think we can control the weather, or we will blame ourselves for making the world hotter, or we will say that we can control the winds and the waves, and tame things and move rivers, and the short answer is we are way in over our head, but we don't think so.
Right.
And even when it comes to being human beings, one of my favorite words is the word utopia, which is a deliberate pun on two Greek words. And the one is utopia, or the good place, and the other word is utopia, or no place. And so when Sir Thomas More wrote his book Utopia, he was saying the good place is no place. But that really never stopped people from trying when they came to America. If only just us Christians can move together into the wilderness, we can live in perfect harmony. And our landscape is littered with what used to be utopias. Because the good place is no place.
Well, the good place is no place. Talk about that in the context of like human effort, right? So we're always striving to make that which we can never make. Doesn't that seem to be the case? Whereas when we look to God to control all things, we really think that we can make the new Jerusalem, the new Holy Land, the new paradise. It's not even Christian or Hebrews.
Yeah, the shining city on the hill.
Right. Yes, exactly. The sort of manifest destiny to conquer the nation. We're all, especially in this country, we're all this sort of special jewel of God. I think there is this reality that the more technologically advanced we become, the more that becomes our own little Leviathan, right? We're wrestling with the Leviathans of our own making and the behemoths of our own making, because they're causing us they're giving us the false impression that we can control things. I mean, and I think that this is where Job, who thinks he can control the outcome of his own life by his good deeds, he's surprised to hear that you really can't do anything on your own. And so the message for us is the same as we strive to try to run God's world instead of just operating the way he calls us to operate. I think that's interesting.
Well, and when once in a while he will remind us, just as he has reminded Job. So in our recent history, when forest fires came through and took the homes of some of the richest and the most wealthy people in our society, and in 1 second, all of their wealth was gone. Just like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I don't know whether the message has gotten through. But to be fair to those people, we're all like that. And you buy what you think are really, really, really sturdy clothes, and in 3 months, a hole is developing in them. And you say, that's just not right. It should have lasted forever because it belongs to me. But nothing lasts forever.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're gonna actually take a break, brother. But when we come back, we're gonna pick up with verse 6 and keep on going. We'll pick up with your thoughts here too. Sorry, we're right against a break, but folks, don't go anywhere. When we return, Pastor Smith and I will keep on going through Job 41. We'll see you on the other side.
Take a look around you. Look closely. Immigrants in the United States and their U.S.-born children now number about 81 million people, or 26% of the population. So chances are there's someone right in your community who doesn't speak English as a first language and who doesn't know Jesus. The Lutheran Heritage Foundation can help by providing you with free Lutheran books translated into over 90 languages. See their complete list of catechisms and Bible storybooks at lhfmissions.org.
Welcome back, friends, to Thy Strong Word. I'm your host, Pastor Phil Booe. With me today, the Reverend Robert Smith, Pastor Emeritus in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And if there's anything you'd like to add to the conversation, be sure to shoot me an email, thystrongword@kfuo.org. I always enjoy hearing from listeners, getting your perspectives on the topics that we discuss here on the show. Be sure to let me know where you're listening from and how you listen when you write, thystrongword@kfuo.org. All right, heading back to this, brother. You know, we've been talking a little bit so far about, God creating a pet out of this fearsome creature. But really, he's talking not so much about what God can do, but about what Job and us can't do. And so now we're going to look into some economic forces of human society that are powerless against Leviathan. I know that sounds kind of weird now, but let's hear what he has to say. Starting with verse 6, he writes, will traders barter or bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. So just wanted to add a couple more verses. So when we look at those verses, economic forces, powerless against him, right? This is not something you can buy and trade. Can you attack him with a bunch of human weapons? Nah, won't work.
Well, and this is where Melville launches off after Moby Dick, because the whaling industry made a living of bringing these whales to market and to dividing them up and selling the blubber and the oil and all of the pieces of it. But when you lay your hands on Leviathan, that's a whole different, I don't want to say kettle of fish, because you're not going to subdue him. You will remember that battle, but you're not going after him again.
Yeah, I love that. I actually didn't even read the next verse, which is 9, which is, behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. So I like that. Like, lay your hands on him. That'll be the last time you do that. Even the sight of Behemoth is enough to just shatter all human confidence and ambition. So, it's a humbling experience when we encounter these forces that are just beyond our comprehension and control. I mean, God is talking about creatures here, a behemoth, Leviathan, But whether they're real creatures or mythical, symbolic, or whatever, they're absolutely symbolic of this idea that there are so many things that we cannot control, cannot understand in this world. And, you know, trying to wrestle with them will continually defeat us. So we should remember what we can control and what we can't. And the hope of a man is false. He's laid low even at the sight of him. I think it'd be worth saying that the hope in that case is the hope of a man if that hope is in himself. Certainly not the hope of a man if his hope is in God. But that's not our default, right, is it? We think we can take care of whatever problems arise, whether it's the weather or climate, as you said, or whether it's cancer or some terrible disease. How often do we just get into this idea that the modern medical system can fix anything in the world? We kind of get that idea that anything can be fixed. And so often, you and I both know, brother, that people find out that's not true. And so I see that's what I see here. Not so much a big creature or even an alligator or something, but just all of us wrestling with those gigantic, scary things about life that we don't understand.
Right. And of course, the next couple words are echoed in St. Paul. Who can stand before me? Who was who had first given to me that I should repay him? What is it under the whole, when everything is under the whole heavens belongs to me? And so, you know, what do you buy for a guy who has everything?
Right.
And we forget that there is really nothing that you can do for God. So all of it is grace.
What I think is interesting is that, you know, you talked about the church fathers associating Leviathan with Satan, and I think that's appropriate. But here, Leviathan's power is a little bit compared by God. You know, in the verses that you shifted into, I want to actually include those now because this is a big shift right here in verse 10. Crucial. It connects that imagery of Leviathan actually first to God's power and authority. Not that God has the same, but rather God has much, much greater. Because you're right. He says no one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up, that is Leviathan. So who then, God says, who then is he who can stand before me? Who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. So yeah, those verses you bring up are important because you're right. That really does bring home. Well, I think this is the thesis of the whole book of Job, which is, you know, who do you think you are? I'm God. Right. You're not. And we've domesticated God so much. We should be a lot more fearful of how blasphemous I think sometimes we treat God because we just treat him like a little spiritual vending machine as opposed to the creator of the universe.
Or we decide what it is that a good God would do. I can't believe in a God who would do this or the other thing. Well, then who is defining whom? And if you have a God who is all powerful and almighty and who by his very words creates the whole universe, who are you to tell him what's good and bad?
Well, and like Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. You know, and those aren't the only places, but you know, God, how can we say this? Growing up in a faith tradition that was not Lutheranism, most of the worship experience, most of everything about the Christian life, I was taught, and I admit that not every other tradition teaches it this way, but this is what I was taught. I was taught basically that everything is about what you can do for God. You know, you show up to church to make God happy. You sing his praises. You pray to him. You know, I remember growing up at night and saying, if I don't pray the prayer before I go to bed, if I were to forget once, that if I should die before I wake, I won't be in heaven. And so it really becomes legalistic, even if it's a legalistic around seeking God's gifts, if that makes sense, right? So going to church is good, but thinking that you're saving yourself by going to church is not. All right. So my point is, you know, I grew up thinking that we had to do all this stuff for God, but the truth is God is not somebody who gets things, but one who gives. You know, he's self-sufficient. He owns all things. He can control Leviathan and Behemoth. They're basically like little pets to him.
Yeah.
Why Yeah. So why do we feel like we have to give stuff to God? We serve God by serving our neighbor. That one thing right there is one of the most freeing things I learned coming into Lutheranism, that we serve God by serving our neighbor. So yes, we all want to do something for God, and God says, yes, good. That's faith. Go out and do whatever you want to do for me, for the least of these. But
yes,
yeah.
and we forget that even those things we want to do, God is already prepared for us to do.
Right. Yeah. So we don't actually get credit for them because God does them through us, but that's not a bad thing because our future is secure in Christ. Yeah. It's a beautiful testimony of the clearest Christian truth. That's why I'm a Lutheran. But here, Job's learning it firsthand in the hard way that no. God's in control and you're not.
Yeah, well, Luther has a very interesting way of summing up the point that is being driven home for Job at this point. He goes, "Why then do you boast about your possessions and wail about the injustice done to you? If anyone touches your honor, your reputation, your possessions, or anything else that you have, he is encroaching not upon what is yours, but what is Christ's. And to drive this lesson home to you, God ordains that all that has been taken from you, which you assumed was yours, so that you may realize that it is not yours, but his." So then we,
the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away.
Yeah, exactly. Which actually Luther does quote. And then he goes, right. So we always see that people do not really seek God's name and honor, especially those haughty saints who aspire to be and have something which belongs only to God.
Mm. How do you think Luther would, because a lot of what Luther was dealing with involved a lot of the abuses of the church back then. And now today, how would Luther maybe say that same message to us today?
I think Luther would throw his hands up and say, "Where's my lazy gardening angel? I want to go back to paradise."
I'm done. I'm ready. Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, that's your problem.
They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. Well, okay, I could buy that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's get into some more verses. We have a lot to cover, but now, folks, it really does become quite descriptive. So we're going to go a little quicker. I'm going to read verses 12 through 17. This is the first section, and this is going to start providing a really detailed description of what this Leviathan looks like. So let's hear it, starting with the top. I will not keep silence, God says, concerning his limbs or his mighty strength or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of a row of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. All right, so this is for sort of what he physically looks like. What he can do comes next in terms of breathing fire and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, maybe some dinosaur type creatures would match this description, but ultimately, this is not a known creature. But I do have to appreciate the term "goodly frame." I think next time somebody asks me my bodily type, I'm going to say my body type is a goodly frame.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Well, what do you think? Pretty descriptive for a symbolic creature. Wouldn't that suggest that these things all should represent something?
Well, I think these all come from existing creatures. It's like creating something out of what various frightening pieces of existing kinds of animals. So a lot of this with the scales and so forth remind you of fish and amphibious creatures of one form or another. This may be why they're thinking crocodile, because these all have a crocodilian kind of cast to them.
Right.
So, it's that kind of thing. He says, yeah, you're pretty brave sitting in front of the television set. What if you were looking this thing right in the eye? And this is what you would see.
Yeah, wait till you come face to face with this guy, this Leviathan. Well, I think of, and again, this is a result of the way I grew up, because I think people during different time periods will all listen to or read the descriptions of this creature and probably can think of their own examples. So before dinosaurs were a big thing, before they were discovered and cataloged like we do today, no one would have thought about a dinosaur. They would have thought about something else, like a crocodile. So to me, it sounds a lot more like a dinosaur in terms of, I think of, shielded plate backs and that sort of thing. What comes next, though, I think really does move us into the symbolic department when it comes to Leviathan, starting with verse 18. He says, his sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils comes smoke as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his neck stick together, firmly cast on him and immovable, and his heart is hard as stone, hard as the lower millstone. So, I mean, we can argue about it being a crocodile or something all day long until every time he sneezes, lightning comes out and he breathes fire. So
yeah, and here we've got the dragon.
Yeah, there's a dragon.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere that the Greek word in the Septuagint is dragon, where we get the word dragon from.
Correct. I think the term actually comes from the Greek, from this description, and similar folklorish descriptions. So, yeah, the idea of a dragon basically is coming from right here. So the question is then, did dragons really exist? And I think my response would be that's the wrong question when it comes to this text.
Yeah.
Although it's still worth wrestling with, because there are plenty of creatures that do all kinds of wild things, like lightning bugs, lightening up their bodies as they fly through the air. You have all kinds of chemical reactions that happen, talking about fish and stuff like that. So, again, you just never know.
Well, and archaeologists, I think some days it's just God trying to tease them, will dig up another set of bones that they've never seen before. And they'll take a look and say, okay, what's this now?
Yeah, I think the problem really is that we find 2 or 3 pieces of a bone and then they reconstruct a creature based on like a little piece of a jawbone. And next thing you know, they got him from snout to tail. And you're like, how do you figure that out? But anyway, I'm getting outside of my realm of expertise. So when I get the emails, I won't be able to respond.
You know the joke of what happens when you try to build a camel by committee. You end up with an elephant.
I haven't heard that one, but boy, it's true, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we pick up some more? Speaking of unusual descriptions of creatures, we've gotten the Leviathan here. A lot of flaming language, though. So just despite the fact that there's no real creature that does this, his sneezings,
Yes. He sneezes fire.
Yeah, I guess, right? Because then there's smoke and fire and everything else. So beautiful image. But if it's not a real creature, and it's only meant to be just something that's very frightening and scary, is that also the point? Just a continuation of God describing this terrifying creature that's just nothing to God, but everything to man? Is that why we're getting this description? Does it connect at all, you think, to Satan and this image of hell being boiling pits of sulfur, that kind of thing? We getting any of that
so.
or not?
I think so. It's this creature fellow is above your pay grade. You are just not going to be able to deal with this.
I mean, and I was going to say, even Satan today, I think oftentimes we think, like Luther, we're just going to break wind in Satan's face and he's going to run away. And of course, Luther does write something to the effect of, that's only for the most mature of Christians or something
Right.
like that. But
Well, then he turns around and he comes at you in another direction.
Right. So that's my point, is that even when we think, oh, yeah, Satan's nothing to us, I think we have to remember that's only because Christ is with us, not because of us. So if it were just us and Satan, trust me, trust God right here, you're going to lose. But to God, Satan's nothing.
Well, and that's kind of, in the end, the spirit behind Luther's absolutely untranslatable hymn, A Mighty Fortress. Because basically a mighty fortress is a picture. And it's a picture basically of a jousting match between Christ and Satan. And you hear the smack talk in the first the first verse. He has a grim game face on, and he's full of guile, and there's nothing on earth that's anything like him. But now look who is striding onto the field. It's Christ, and none can stand to him. One little word is going to fell him. Mm-hmm. And then in the last stanza, we don't have to be afraid so much. That doesn't come into the English. We don't have to be afraid so much because he's on the plain by us with his good gifts and spirit.
So that's the field, holding the field victorious, maybe? Was that where we're getting that? Okay.
Yeah. Well, so it's basically, you're out there, you're outmatched. You take one look at Satan and you go, gloop. But then you have a champion.
I was going to say, we need a champion, right?
Yeah, and he comes onto the field, and that's it. Game over.
So in the last few verses of this chapter, which I'm going to read now, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because let's think about this. Think about you on that field against what I'm about to describe and what I've already described. And think, of course, now about your champion who gets sent out there in your stead, which is Jesus, for whom, because he's God, this is nothing, right? He can put a leash on this guy. Actually, he has. But anyway, that's coming up. Verse 25. Right. When he raises himself, speaking of Leviathan, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing, they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it doesn't avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as straw, bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him, sling stones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. His under parts, they're like sharp potsherds. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. He makes the deep boil like a pot, and he makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Behind him, he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. On earth, there is not his like, a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high, and he is king over all the sons of pride. That last verse, right? A brotherhood, a pride people, sons of prideful folks, proud beasts. So I wonder here, is this wrapping it up that he's the king over all these great beasts in terms of pride, or is he king over all those who would be prideful because, well, he's going to show you right now that you can't stand up to him. Either way, it seems like that's the overarching point. Is right. This guy's nothing to God, and look what he can do to you.
Yeah. The whole thrust of this is, hey, Job, you let me worry about this. This is my game, not yours. Yeah. One of my favorite lines is you don't want to play chess with God. Because he can see way farther down to the game than you can.
Right. Well, and I'm going to take it a step further and say, not because of omnipotence, mind you, but you don't really want to play around with Satan either. You know, he's not God. He's just a creature. but he's got thousands of years of experience and power of a mighty angel. This is not something like Leviathan that you want to deal with on your own. You can't. So the flippant way in which we cast off Satan in our world today, it gives me of two minds. On the one hand, I think, good, right? Satan is nearly mocked in the culture. Christians don't even fear him anymore. That's just what he deserves. On the other hand, I think he's not taken seriously.
And I think that's just the way he likes it.
Well, yeah. So that's what I'm saying is on the one hand, you think that's looking pretty good. But yeah, when you think about it, just what you said, he likes it that way, doesn't he?
Yeah, because if nobody takes him seriously, there's all kinds of damage he can do.
And I think that's the worry as we both want to rely on Christ, because we do, and we need to, we have to, because this is how powerful Satan is against us, this Leviathan against anything. But at the same time, yeah, where's that balance? What is so far the message for us today? I mean, we could probably talk about what this means for Job, but I think that's kind of clear. What does it mean for us today as we wrap up the show? What do we take away from it?
Well, the first part is that absolutely everything that we have been given, we are also going to have taken away from us at one point or another. When we actually are taken from this life, none of the things that we've accomplished or done is coming with us. It's just going to be our soul while our body awaits the resurrection of all flesh. And so you have to ask your question, why do you want to invest in things that will not endure? And even when a disaster hits and your house is smashed and all of your goods are gone and all of the family pictures that you've cherished from all these years and all these things are gone, goodbye. Yet still you will live, if not here, then in everlasting life. And for Christians, because of Christ and what he did, we know that this is only the preamble. And so
just the beginning of eternity for us. It really does put things in perspective. It even puts things like this giant creature into perspective, right? Because if God is king over all of these things, he's in control of this whole world. And yet in a moment of time, he's going to recreate the heavens and the earth. Whose side do you want to be on? Yeah, right. Do you want to be succumbing to the creatures that can do nothing, or God, who is going to has redeemed the whole world through Christ and is one day going to bring that to completion in a new heavens and new earth? I just think we sometimes, because God's presence is not temporal in a way like that we would prefer, right? We encounter animals and people and things all the time, but for God, he really can only be viewed in faith. And so I think a lot of people have gotten comfortable with the idea that, well, this is just how all things are going to be, and humanity is just going to continue to get more and more able to control the environment and control the weather and control sin and death. And I think at the end of the day, we aren't in control.
Right. And if the Lord tarries, every kingdom that now stands will fall, and others will rise in their place. So the United States, Russia, China, at a single word from him, and they're gone. And their successors will take its place. And so the investment that St. Peter urges us to do makes all that sense. Invest in things that are in heaven, where a thief does not break in, and where moth does not destroy and rust does not decay. Because where your heart is, that's where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be.
Well, I think that is where we are going to end our session today. But I'm so grateful for my guest that he's joined us this morning, the Reverend Robert Smith, Pastor Emeritus, living up there in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Brother, thanks so much for being on the show again.
Sure. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, see you in a few weeks for our next one, which is Hebrews. But for now, we're wrapping up this episode with not only our goodbyes, but also a reminder to join us tomorrow as we finish up Job. It's the very last chapter of the book. And as we've already intimated, on Wednesday, we have a brand new topic coming down that's going to be the book of Hebrews. Should be an exciting one. So I look forward to wrapping up Job and moving on this week, and I hope you're along for the ride. So until tomorrow, may God's peace and blessings be with all of you as we pray, Father, keep us in thy strong word.